So as messengers and mediators for God and his divine counsel, Israelite prophets in the Bible appear participating in the midst of these celestial or heavenly arraignments of the assembly. This participatory role seems warranted, at least from an ancient Israelite theological perspective, because biblical Israel viewed humanity as divine beings, or at least quasi-divine, as gods, perhaps with a lowercase g. Now, recent critical studies on the Bible have shown that the phenomenon of prophecy was actually not unique to biblical Israel. A survey of textual evidence from Ugarit in the northwest Semitic sphere, from Aramaic and Mesopotamian sources, has led scholars to the conclusion that there is evidence that the judgment of the heavenly assembly of deities on a whole, these judgments were transmitted by means of divination and oftentimes conveyed to spiritual guides. In the Old Testament, of course, these spiritual guides who represent the decisions and judgment of the heavenly assembly are, in fact, the biblical prophets. In the Hebrew Bible, the noun sod, or council, or assembly, we encounter this noun as a description of the heavenly assembly governed by Israel's deity. Now, according to the psalmist, the Lord is a God dreaded in the sod, in the council of the Kedushim, the holy beings, referring to Psalm 89, verse 7. So an explicit link between Israelite prophets and the sod provides ultimately the conceptual background for Amos's very famous declaration for Latter-day Saints, that surely the Lord God doeth nothing save he revealeth his secret unto his servants the prophets, quoting the King James Version of Amos chapter 3, verse 7. But in reality, this word translated as secret is once again the Hebrew noun sod, meaning counsel. This is, of course, a reflection of the same concept that we witnessed in the previous presentation that Jeremiah uses as a qualification to identify a true prophet as one who has seen and heard the affairs of the assembly or council. Now, a similar assertion appears in the Old Testament through Zechariah, who records a vision in which the high priest Joshua, if you'll recall, attends a meeting of this heavenly court in chapter 3, verses 1 through 7. So in Psalm 25, verse 14, quoting that Old Testament passage, we read that the sod, or counsel of Yahweh, of Jehovah, is reserved for those who fear him, and unto them he makes known his covenant. Now, this is the position, at least from a biblical perspective, that the prophets find themselves in. And of course, this background, this conceptual understanding has direct application for the way we should interpret Lehi's experience in 1 Nephi chapter 1. Now, in my mind, the greatest connection between 1 Nephi and chapter 1 from a biblical perspective would clearly be Isaiah's experience with the heavenly council presented in Isaiah's call narrative from chapter 6 of that collection. Isaiah chapter 6 contains a story of prophetic commission in which this ancient Israelite prophet Isaiah appears ultimately as an inclusive member of the heavenly host or the divine council. Isaiah's vision in chapter 6 describes his the spiritual manifestation that Isaiah enjoys concerning the Lord of hosts, who appears specifically and significantly seated upon his throne, surrounded by members of the heavenly court. Now, this is important because scholars have shown that this type of visionary encounter, whether we're talking biblical or post-biblical accounts, a throne theophany signifies that a judgment against an individual or a group is at hand. And that's clearly the case for Isaiah chapter 6. So, reading verse 1, we read, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and raised, his robes filling the hall. That's verse 1 from chapter 6. So, in this heavenly temple, the seraphim function in a capacity typically associated with the members of the priestly office in the Hebrew Bible, protecting the kadosh, or holiness of God. So, verse 3, we read that one seraph called to another and said, Holy, 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 Lord of hosts. Like Isaiah chapter 6, the opening chapters of Genesis clearly identify the members of the celestial court as guardians of space made holy by the presence of God with the cherubim. So whether they are seraphim or cherubim, these members of the heavenly host are the assembly, the council assembled, gathered around Yahweh in his throne, around his throne, in his throne room setting, his heavenly temple. In the call narrative, Isaiah clearly longs to participate with these members of the assembly, praising the Lord of hosts. However, as a member of the telestial world, the prophet Isaiah remains, as he describes, a man of unclean lips who dwells in the midst of a people who possess this same attribute. And that's in verse 5. So in order to join the council, Isaiah needs to experience a type of sanctification significantly enough, at the temple altar. And this, of course, appears in verse 6 through this mouth cleansing ritual that takes place in the story of commission. So the act of mouth cleansing that Isaiah visualizes or describes in the account is an ordinance that is very similar to the ancient Mesopotamian ritual known as the opening of the mouth, ceremony connected with idols. And it's a process whereby an idol would become divinized or divine. Now, as Victor Hurwitz has noted, quote, a large portion of the Mesopotamian sources raise the possibility that the washing of the mouth or the purity of the mouth has independent significance as a characteristic granting or symbolizing special divine or quasi-divine status to the person or object so designated. The pure mouth enables the person or object to stand before the gods or to enter the divine realm, or symbolizes a divine status. End of quote. Now that's Victor Hurwitz in the periodical known as the periodical Hebrew Union College Annual from 1989, in a very interesting article entitled Isaiah's Impure Lips and Their Purification in Light of Akkadian Sources. So, by analogy then, if we take that understanding from the ancient Mesopotamian realm and use that as backdrop then for Isaiah's encounter, Isaiah, through a mouth cleansing ritual at the temple altar, receives a divine status. He becomes a god, as one fully capable of participating in the celestial council. So when, in a manner reminiscent of other Near Eastern council tales, the Lord therefore calls the volunteers to address the crisis of Israel's apostasy in this account. He asked God, as presented, asking the question, who will go for the all-inclusive us of the council? Isaiah responds with as specifically a newly inducted member of the heavenly court, here am I, send me. And of course, Isaiah can do this because he had, through this ritual, become an official member of the us, of the assembly that surrounds Yahweh in his throne room atmosphere of presence.
Well,